Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulih Nabil Kareem wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Okay, so today we are going to be looking at stanzas 9, 10, and 11. Last week we'd gone over other stanzas. We did stanzas 7 and 8. And we're still speaking about a certain theme, which is the theme of what the Muslims had done, right? What had they accomplished? And in other words, what had they done for Allah? What had they done for God? And we're going to go ahead and read this, inshallah. Some of our regulars are missing today, but before I go ahead and read it, would anyone like to actually read this stanza? If not, I can read it, which is not an issue. So I'll go ahead and read this first one, and then someone can inshallah read the next one. Bismillah. तू ही कह दे कि उखाड़ा दर खैबर किसने, शहर कैसर जो था उसको किया सर किसने, तोड़े मखलूक खुदावंद के पैकर किसने, काट कर रख दिए कुफ्फार के लश्कर किसने, किसने ठंडा किया आतिश कदा ईरान को, किसने फिर जिंदा किया तज़किरा यज़दां को. So there's a couple of things that are being spoken about here. So we're going to take it line by line. तू ही कह दे के उखाड़ा दर खैबर किसने. So you tell us, right? You tell us. It's a rhetorical question to God, or it's he's speaking to God. तू कह दे, you tell, right? You tell us. Rather. Right? You tell us. Who was the one that Okarna, like to uproot something, is that's what it refers to, right? To uproot something. Dar-e Khaybar, right? Dar-e Khaybar refers to a gate, right? To the gate of Khaybar. Right? Who is the one that took out the gate of Khaybar? Who uprooted it? Shahar Qaisar ka jo tha. Right? Qaisar is in reference to a king in Iran. Right? Caesar, right? Khusro, right? It was a king in Iran, and he's talking about Iran right now, right? And usko kiya sar kisne? Who's the one that basically cut it off? Who's the one that or actually sar is to conquer, right? To conquer. Who is the one that conquered the Sasanians? Who is the one that conquered the Iranians? Obviously, they're talking about who? They're talking about the Muslims. Kisne? Tode makhluk khudawandon ke pekar kisne? Khudawandon ke pekar kisne tode? Who is the one that went in and they completely removed? This is actually, this is not khudawand. I don't know why it says khudawandon, but Khudawand ke paikar kisne? Who's the one that broke those? Now, what does that refer to? Makhluk Khudawand is in reference to idols or handmade gods. Right? That's what it's referring to. Handmade gods. Unke paikar kisne tode? Who is the one that destroyed their existence? And this is going to contrast with some of the other ones that we're also going to take a look at. Kaat kar rakh diye kuffar ke lashkar kisne? Who are the ones, right? Lashkar is an army. Right? Kaat kar rakh diye kuffar ke lashkar kisne? Who is the one that completely destroyed the army of the disbelievers? That's also something that's being spoken about here. Kisne thanda kiya atish kada Iran ko? Right? Atish kada refers to places of fire worship. Right? These are basically places of fire worship. And then kisne phir zinda kiya tazkira yazdan ko? Who is the one that they once again revived tazkira yazdan? Tazkira is a reminder, right? But it refers to mentioning the name of God is what it's in reference to. Who's the one that brought the name of God back? Mentioning the name of God. Right? Who's the one that brought that back? Who's the one that is speaking about it? So now when we understand this and look at it in a holistic light, we see what? We see that this stanza is going over a certain question. How did the Muslims fight? How did they actually fight? And it's actually really interesting the way he's saying this. Tu hi keh de ke. Why don't you just go ahead and tell us, huh? Why don't you go ahead and tell us, what did we actually do for you? We went and we uprooted the door of Khaybar, right? And we conquered the city of Qaisar. So he's talking about what they actually did in Persia. So he uprooted this main superpower. And if you all remember, in Islamic history, during the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the two powers that were what do you call it? That were constantly versing each other and fighting each other were the Byzantines, right? And then there were the Persians, the Sassanid Empire and the Byzantine Empire. And we know that between both of them, there was constant warfare that used to go on. And that's the thing what a lot of people don't understand, which is for that time period, for the Prophet ﷺ and his army to basically come in and eventually destroy both of them is a very, very interesting feature, because I'll show you why. I'll show you what was very interesting about that. I'm actually gonna show this map to you all. So this is a map of at that time, which were the tribes at that time period in Mecca and Medina. And you can see you have little Mecca over here, right? You have Mecca kind of in this area and Medina over here. And you have this huge Persian Empire and this huge Eastern Roman, aka the Byzantine Empire. So you can see they had all of this land and they had all of this land over here. So here we're talking about what? You have Iraq and you have all these different things. And eventually, which the other map we had gone over, we'll see that what? All of this area, everything around here, right? From this point on, is taken over by the Muslims. Right? They eventually go and they fight on behalf of their faith, our faith, and they go and take it. And they go and fight and they win. So keeping all of this in mind, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about that they went into this area. And if you actually look at this, the Persian Empire here, it's actually bigger here than it is today, right? Because you only have Iran today. Iran is and Afghanistan are the only two, and parts of maybe Uzbekistan, they may speak Dari and other languages. But the main Persian Empire was so much bigger back then. And eventually the Muslims would go here and take the Persian Empire, and people would become Muslim. So keeping that in mind is important when we're talking about this and having this discussion. So bringing it back to what we were speaking about, we'll connect. Sorry, 1 second. Need to disconnect this one. Sorry, 1 second. So keeping all of this in mind, he's talking about all these different places in the Persian Empire, right? Who are the ones to uproot the door of Khaybar, the gate of Khaybar? Shahar Qaisar ka jo tha, right? The city that was of Qaisar, right? The city that belonged to him, to Caesar, or I think it was Khusro at that time. Qaisar was in reference to a general king at that time, right? So the king, this town that he had, who are the ones usko kiya sar, that we conquered it, right? We took it over. Thoda makhluk khudawand ke pekar kisne? Who are the ones that took over and destroyed these handmade idols? Who are the ones that had taken over and basically destroyed these idols and these handmade gods and that people used to worship? And not only that, Pekar, existence, which in Arabic is often referred to as wujud, is also in contrast to the idea that Allah's existence is something that we're always talking about in that sense, right? Who's the one that removed their existence? And then kaat kar rakh diye kuffar ke lashkar kisne? So the disbelievers that would fight, who are the ones that went out of their way and they took care of those armies? By the way, I think we had discussed this. Do you know what the actual, the Urdu language? Urdu is actually a Turkish word which refers to what? Lashkar. It refers to an army. It's an army language because you had people from all over the world coming together in this army to form the language. Kaat kar rakh diye kuffar ke lashkar kisne? Who are the ones to do that? It was the Muslims. Kisne thanda kiya aatish kada Iran ko? Who are the ones that unhone thanda kar diya? So actually thanda, for those of you that don't know Urdu, means to be cold. And here thanda kiya, to make cold. That's what they're doing. Now, if you have fire worshippers, right? If somebody's worshiping a fire, obviously fire is hot, right? I'm just putting red there because to show you it's hot. But now it's been made cold because the fire has basically been what? It's been put out. Atish kada Iran ko. Who is the one that went into these places of fire worship and had put out the fire? They had extinguished that fire. Again, it was the Muslims. Kisne phir zinda kiya tazkira yazdan ko? Who is the one that elevated the name of God, Allah's name, in all these situations? Phir zinda kiya, meaning what? People were not worshiping God. People were not worshiping Allah. Phir zinda karna, to make alive again, right? To make alive again or resurrect. Kisne phir zinda kiya tazkira yazdan ko? Who is the one that resurrected all of these areas? Who is the one that brought about Allah's name once again? So that's what the 9th stanza is. I'm going to go into the 10th stanza unless anyone has any questions or comments or concerns that they'd like to talk about or anything to add. You're more than welcome. Okay. And again, as you're following along, feel free to just jump in. Let's go into the 10th stanza. कौन सी कौम फकत तेरे तलबकार हुई और तेरे लिए ज़हमत कश पैकार हुई किसकी शमशीर जहांगीर जहांदार हुई किसकी तकबीर से दुनिया तेरी बेदार हुई किसकी हैबत से सनम सहमे हुए रहते थे मुंह के बल गिरे हु अल्लाहु अहद कहते थे. I need to fix some of those the text in here, but it's fine. So, kaun si qaum tere talabkar hui? Talabkar means what? Talab refers to wanting. So, talabkar hui. I'm going to say actually the word that we should have is yearning for, right? Who was yearning? Right? Which was who are the people that were yearning for you? Kaun si qaum faqat teri talabkar hui? Or tere liye, or tere liye zahmat, yeah, tere liye. I don't know where that went. Tere liye zahmat kash pekar hui. Zahmat kash refers to doing what? Taking the inconvenience of something, right? Or tere liye zahmat kash pekar hui. Pekar, here is in reference to, or rather, Zahmat kash pekar is in reference to taking the incompetence of fighting, or the inconvenience of fighting. So this is actually Zahmat kash pekar, right? Taking the inconvenience of fighting. Right, so we did that. We took the inconvenience of fighting. And we were longing for you, Ya Allah, right? We were longing for you. Kiski shamshir jahangir jahandar hui, right? Jahandar hui. Shamshir, as we know, is a reference to a sword, right? Jahangir, it's actually spelled Jahang. Jahang. How do they write it here? Yeah, I think it's just like this. There you go. Right, Jahangir. Jahangir is actually a very common name, but it refers to a world conqueror. Right, Jahandar hui. And then Jahandar refers to conquering. Right, conquering the world. Right, Jahandar hui. So whose sword acted as a conqueror of the world and conquered the world? Whose sword did it? And again, as we had spoken about before, this is happening in around what standard? It's happening around the standard of what? Doing it for Allah's name, doing it for Allah's sake. They're not doing it for themselves. They're not doing it just to make a state, but they're doing it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's cause. And then it goes on. Kiski takbir se dunya teri bedar hui. Right? Kiski takbir se. Whose takbir? By saying what? By saying Allahu Akbar. Right? Whose calls of your exaltation and glorification woke up the world? Right? Kiski takbir? Right? Whose takbir was it? Right? Whose takbir was it? When we said Allahu Akbar, whose takbir was it? Who are we elevating? We were elevating who? God himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kiski takbir se dunya teri bedar hui? Right? And again, bedar hona means what? Utna. To wake up. Right? To wake up. Through whose takbir did the world wake up towards? Through whose calling towards did we dedicate so much of our life towards to wake the world up? Because if you actually think about it, right? A lot of what goes into teaching people about Islam, teaching people about faith goes into what? Waking them up. Waking them up from a slumber that they themselves have kind of forgotten about, that they themselves have not been privy to, that they themselves don't know about. Especially, you know, when I'm going through and I teach people, when it's like history or fiqh or something like that, and when I show those maps, I do it for a reason. It's because people don't know. Like if you ask a lot of South Asian Muslims, they don't know about to what degree Islam had spread throughout the world. They don't know to what degree our languages and our cultures were combined. They were together, right? But later that was changed. Later people were made to forget that, oh, at the end of the day, you are a Pakistani or you are an Indian or you are this or you are that. So all of that came into play. Sister Sarah's question, was the Sassanid Empire Zoroastrian? Yes, they were fire worshippers. The Zoroastrians and fire worshippers are actually the same thing. So yep, they were mainly fire worshippers. So you have this at the end and you see this all together. So the key word that it comes down to is that, yes, kisi ko bedar kar dena, to wake someone up. How can you wake someone up? And they did it through what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's like mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's takbir, right? And then they did that through what? They were doing it through conquering the world on the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not only that, you know, it's interesting. That taking the inconvenience of fighting, because as Muslims, fighting is not the first thing we do, right? Like we've like had a gajillion seminars post 9/11. It's like Muslims are not trying to fight. We're not trying to create a state, right? But rather it's about what? Defending yourself, defending your honor. You know, there's a really famous book by Dr. Yahya Michaud about Muslims living in non-Muslim lands, and that if you can practice your faith, you don't have to just get up and leave from there. So they're saying here that they were in a place of power and they did fight when it was necessary, right? And that's the point. Zahmat is literally the word that's being used, Zahmat kashif pekar hue, right? Or hui. That they took up the inconvenience of fighting. It wasn't something just random. And let me ask you this, you know, the idea of waking up in your life, bedar ho jana, is that something easy to happen? Like when a wake up call hits you, do you just like get up and it's very comfortable and it's very easy. No, it's uncomfortable. It causes you to do what? It causes you to not understand where you are, who you are, what you're doing, what you're supposed to do. So bringing all of that together, he's saying that it's inconveniencing it, right? But even that inconvenience, it was something that they yearned for. There was talab, right? There was talab for it. So there was talab within them to do something inconvenient because it was for God, and that was in conquering the world, in raising the name of Allah, and in waking the people up. That's what's being mentioned here. Is there anyone that wants to, actually no, there's two more lines. Yeah. किसकी हैबत से सनम सहमे हुए रहते थे, मुंह के बल गिर के हु अल्लाहु अहद कहते थे. So किसकी हैबत से? Hebat is a form of like fear. Fear is like the word that is often used, but I don't think it's actually fear. You know when you walk into a room and I think the word is actually awe or grandeur, right? I spelled that right. You know when you walk into a, I think it's with an E actually, sorry. I think it's grandeur, right? So you know when you walk into a room sometimes, or someone walks into a room, what is it that happens? You know, maybe it's your father, and your father walks into a room, and you as a child, you knew it's like, oh man, dad's here. So it's not really fear, it's more so a sense of awe out of respect. That's what haiba is, right? Or hebat, right? It's an awe or a grandeur. And you know, it's a form of there's a sense of charisma associated with that person. So, kiski habat se sanam sahme hue rehte the, right? That from whose grandeur, from whose awe were the idols, sanam, right? Sanam was an idol, right? Sahme hue rehte the. That from whose awe? It was the awe of Allah, right? It was the awe of God. It was the awe of Allah, as we're going to see. So that hebat was there, that it evoked a sense of respect. It evoked a sense of care. It evoked a sense of honor. So the idols, they would find themselves in a place of fear through that grandeur, right? They would find themselves in a place of fear from the grandness of Allah. Muh ke bal gir ke. So they used to fall on their faces, right? Muh ke bal is on one's face. And then gir ke, to fall. Girna is falling, right? We kind of know these. They used to fall onto their faces and what? Hu Allahu ahad kehte the, right? Hu Allahu ahad. Qul hu Allahu ahad, right? You know that. That they used to say what? They used to say that God is one because they understood it. Just the presence of God, just the presence of these Muslims would show them who they're dealing with. It would show them that these are the Muslims that we are talking about. It would show them that it is with these people that we are going to understand who God is, what the oneness of God looks like. And when people don't understand that, they don't see that, it's because they haven't understood who the being is in front of them. And if they haven't understood who the being is in front of them, they haven't actually really understood who at the end of the day is the one bringing the message. And at this point, and in the next stanza, we're going to talk about who's actually bringing that message. Okay. Does anyone have anything to add? And if not, would anyone like to read the next lines? All right. Let's get into it. So the next stanza, and we're almost done. I'll read it. आ गया ऐन लड़ाई में. Yes.
Nihal, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can we go back to the first line from the previous stanza?
Sure.
So, you know, when you read this, kaun si kaum, and it's not a kind of, you know, going through this, but there is kind of a focus on fakat.
Yeah.
So, kaun si kaum fakat teri talabgar hui. There were other nations as well. There were other believers in God also, the Christians,
Right.
the Jews and all. But here it's single, saying this is the single Qawm-e-Khuda, which, did all those things that will come in the next lines. So just a little stress on this fakat word here.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry, brother, what was your name? I don't see it on your thing here.
Dr. Mughal, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Jazakallah khair. So faqat here is in reference to what? Is in reference to that we were the only ones, right? It was only them.
Yeah.
And if you actually go back to, or if we all were to go back to the old lines, which I don't have on this document, but we had spoken about what? Actually, I can just bring it up because I have this. Yeah. So we'd spoken about this, right? Remember, there are all these different groups, and we're going to keep referencing this area, right? So we had all these different groups, but who are the only ones, right? Keep referencing back. It was only us. It was just us, right? And faqat is also an Arabic word. It means only. It was just us. So we had all these different groups, right? You had the Turanis, right? You had these people. You had the Seljuks. You had the Chinese, right? We had all these different people. We had the Sassanids, right? We had the Greeks. We had the Jews. We had the Christians. We had all these different groups. But it was only the Muslims that are being spoken about here. Right? Who was actually yearning for your name? Who was actually yearning towards your cause? Right? Who was doing that? We don't know. It was only the Muslims. There was no one else. Or no one else is doing it for that. Who took the inconvenience of fighting? It was the Muslims. Whose sword came out of its scabbard to spread your message? It was the Muslims. It was Allah's takbir, sure, but we were the ones that carried it around. That's the point that is brought up. Jazakallah khair, appreciate that. Dr. Saab, would you like to read the next lines?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
आ गया ऐन लड़ाई में अगर वक्त नमाज किबला रूहों के ज़मीं बोस हुई कौमे हिजाज एक ही सफ में खड़े हो गए महमूद और अयाज ना कोई बंदा रहा ना कोई बंदा नवाज बंदा व साहब व महताज व गनी एक हुए तेरी सरकार में पहुंचे तो सभी एक हुए.
Alhamdulillah. So let's talk about the last stanza. आ गया ऐन लड़ाई में अगर वक्त नमाज. If we were fighting, right? ऐन लड़ाई में. If we were in the middle of fighting, like in the pangs of battle. If the time of Salah came, right? Waqt namaz. For those of you that don't know, namaz is the Arabic, the Urdu and Persian word for prayer, for Salah, right? So you'll often hear that. It's actually also used in Turkey as well. So when that time of prayer used to come, Qibla ru hoke zameen bos hui qawm hijaz. Right, we would still pray even at that time period. And there was something I wanted to share with you all, because sometimes folks are not acquainted with what actually our faith speaks about. But I wanted to actually share with you that how within our tradition, there's literally a whole verse dedicated to how you should pray if you're in battle. Right, it's a verse number 102 in Surah 4. وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمُ الصَّلَاةَ فَلْتَقُمْ طَائِفَةٌ. Right, this is one of two verses that speaks about that. And I don't want to get into the details of it, but I want you to just show how important prayer is in our faith, how important Salah is, because sometimes you'll hear people say stuff like, oh, as you can tell, like Iqbal was not somebody that was very entrenched in Salah or not entrenched in prayer. Or somebody that was, he didn't really care for those things. And someone's personal piety at the end of the day can be debated to the nth degree, right? But you just don't know. But at the same time, you'll hear Allama Iqbal say things like, Israz se waqif hai na mulla na faqih, kya samjhenge ye do rakat ke imam, right? Like he's kind of taking a jab at people who just pray. But don't do anything with that. They're not going to understand the nature of Islam. But it's really interesting because he's bringing up this point that the Muslims were these people that they, at the end of the day, established the prayer even when they were in battle. So it says here, when you're among them and you lead them in prayer, let a group of them stand. So one group of people will stand and they'll have their arms with them, right? They'll have their weapons. And then when they go into sajda, they'll be in sajda, and then another group will come forward which hasn't prayed yet, and they'll take precautions. But there's a whole system quite literally set up through a Quranic narrative about how we should behave whilst we are in salah, whilst we are praying and in war. So it's just not a it's just not something which is random that is being mentioned. Is that it's being shown because this is very important, right? It's being shown because at the end of the day, when people don't understand that, when they don't see that they're supposed to continue to pray, then they're taking away from the fact that they're supposed to be involved in an endeavor which will help them be better Muslims, which will help them come to terms with understanding who they are. Okay, why is this not working? 1 second. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is acting up. All right, that should work now. So coming back to this, right? Agya and ladai mein agar waqt namaz. If the time to pray came whilst we were in the battle, Qibla ruh ho ke zameen bos hue qawm Hijaz. Qibla ruh ho gaye, right? Zameen bos hue, right? That they were literally kissing the ground, meaning what? Right? Zameen bos ho jana. It means to be in a state of sajda, right? To be in a state of prostration. That's literally where we were. Right? And the time for prayer came in, and ladai mein, right? In the pang of battles, in the pang of the battle. Like, it just sounds very weird today because even a lot of like people will hear them when it comes to something like prayer or fasting. Like, you'll hear people say like, oh, you know, I have an exam, so I'm not gonna fast. So I have this meeting, I'm not gonna fast, right? Or, oh yeah, prayer is very inconvenient for me. Oh, you know, it's in the winter, you know, Dhuhr, Asr, and Maghrib just coming back to back to back to back. But what more attention do you need than in a in a battle? And literally the Muslims are finding a way to still pray while they're in battle, while they're waiting to be ambushed by an enemy. Qibla ruh ho ke zameen bos hue qawm Hijaz. They literally were back there kissing the ground and still worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point. Ek hi saf mein khade hue Mahmud wa Ayaz. What does that actually refer to? Right? In one saf stood Mahmud, and in another, and in the same line stood Ayaz. And we're going to see actually Mahmud is in reference to a king, and Ayaz is actually in reference to a servant. So at that point, even the king and even the servant would stand together. So classism was something that was, what they're showing is that, oh, classism didn't make a difference to us. Right? We weren't being classist. We weren't, you know, differentiating between the rich and the poor. And then it goes in. Na koi banda raha or na koi banda nawaz. So no one at that point, there was no distinction made between the servant and the master, right? There was no distinction made at all. So the servant and the king, or the master, right? The servant and the master would stand together, and there was no one who was specifically usko nawaz diya gaya tha. They weren't given any sense of like special treatment in prayer, right? Everyone stood next to each other, and that's the beauty of Salah, is that regardless of who you are, what your economic standing is, you stand in the same line. you stand in the same place. And then it goes on. He says that what? Banda o sahib o muhtaj o ghani ek hue. Right? Banda o sahib o muhtaj o ghani o ek hue. So whether you were a servant, whether you were a sahib, second a muhtaj and a ghani. So banda is often reference to a servant. And then the sahib is in reference to an owner usually. You could also refer to the master. Muhtaj is somebody in need, right? And then a ghani is somebody who has wealth, basically, or somebody who's rich. So in that state, they're saying that we all came together, we all became one. Teri sarkar mein pahunche to sabhi ek hue. Bandaye o sahibe o muhtaje o ghani ek hue. Teri sarkar mein pahunche to sabhi ek hue. So everyone came together and everyone was one, right? Everyone was there. When you look at the lives of the companions, you saw that the poor and the rich were together. You saw that everyone was taken care of. You have this tradition of mu'akha, where the muhajirun come to Medina and the Ansar literally are splitting their wealth in half for them, right? They're splitting their wealth in half for them. They're giving them half of everything they have. So the questions then become to be, it's like we were never ghafil. We were never we were never not remembering you. We were never in a state where we forgot you. We remembered you when we were on the battlefield. We stood up in the battlefield. And when we stood up in the battlefield, we brought the rich and the poor together, right? So we still continue to pray even when we were in the battlefield. When we were right there, we still prayed our salah. Whether you were a king and whether you were a servant, everyone came together. Right? No one was distinguished in that sense, right? No one was distinguished. Right? No one was distinguished. Regardless of whether you were a servant, whether you were middle class or lower class, or whether you were somebody who was extremely wealthy, it didn't matter. Everyone came together, and they came together for who? Teri sarkar mein, right? Teri sarkar mein. In your, sarkar is a government, obviously, but it's saying that in front of you, when we stood before you, when you were the one to give the rulings about something, if you were there, we stood in front of you as equals. When we got there, jab hum pahunche, to sabhi ek hue. Everyone was one. Everyone became one. So why are we in this situation? Again, that's what shikwa is about. Shikwa is saying, Ya Allah, we've done everything. Shart insaf, like that was something that was spoken about, that we were all one. So why are we being thrown like this? Why are we in such difficult stages? Why are we in such pangs? Why are the Muslims being divided up? Why are colonizers taking over our lands? Why are people leaving Islam, right? And as last week Dr. Zabit said, it's the case is being built, right? I'm actually very tempted to kind of turn towards the Jawab al-Shikwa route and just kind of be like, Allah is going to respond this, and this, but I'm going to not do that. But yeah, any questions or comments or concerns about what we just spoke about? Because we did 3 stanzas today. I think we did a decent amount actually. So I'd love to, hear from you all and see what you have to add, inshallah. What do you all think? What are you thinking? What's on your mind?
Well, the only thing on my mind is that when we look where we are today, looks like exactly where we were when Iqbal wrote this. So pertinent to today. Again, we may not be directly under colonization, but we are indirectly in worse situation than we were.
Yeah.
And so it just reminds us again that, everything that he's talking here so beautifully is just reminding that, what we were, where Mahmoud or Ayaz or Ghani or the beggar were all in one line equal when they stood in front of God, and that was the state of affairs then. And unfortunately, the state of affairs is very, very, very different today.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And again, just one more thing, again, and thank you for not going to Jawab Shikwa, because Jawab Shikwa came 2 years after this. So so that, we have to look at our situation, our fate, our complaint right now. and then time will come for that, inshallah. But today I think you did very good, and we covered a lot of 3 stanzas were great.
Yeah, I think from now on, I'm just going to keep it to 3 stanzas because I think within, and somebody can correct me, but I do believe the message is generally understood. And now we're just going to kind of open up the message, right? We have the base points that are going to be discussed. And Allama Sahib is going to bring it in from different perspectives, right? So he's talking about who fought for you. We spoke about, we were not ghafil of you. He's going to talk about who was the one longing for you. So yeah, I think from this point forward, we're going to probably do 3 stanzas every day or every week, inshallah. But yeah, you're right. And it's the situation that Muslims are in. Oh, by the way, Biden Mubarak to whoever it matters to. But when you look at the situation that Muslims are in often, you will find that they're there not because of the fact that they, were just destroyed and they were attacked, but more so because of the fact that we'll see in Jawab al-Shikwa, people kind of just let go and people didn't understand the situation that they were in. It's like, why are we in this situation? Right? First, we have to come up with it within ourselves. Have we come to terms with what we have done? Have we actually done something? That's the first question. And Allama Sahib was saying that, yes, we have done something. We have endeavored towards a great degree towards your name, right? So why are we left in this like why are we left in this like tattered state? And that's what a lot of this is going to speak about. And he's going to go towards it. Like you'll see, fight while you're in the pang of a battle, to stop everything and to pray, to bring people together regardless of their financial state so they can pray together. We'll see that as well, right? And then we'll also see that we brought a sense of grandeur to Allah's name. So all of that is going to be brought together, and we'll see it grow. And then finally, we'll see that, as we saw, that how did the Muslims fight? The Muslims fought in a very intense manner. So inshallah, we'll continue to go through it from next week as well. Obviously, we're going to see a turn. Oh, by the way, next week we're live. We're live, inshallah, next week. So please do come if you can. We'll be live on the MCGB campus, inshallah. Okay, inshallah, I will let you all go a few minutes early. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.